this is Sarah with Lasers and More, and today we are going to design a Christmas ornament that is made up of a name and a date and a couple circles. In my first video, you learned how to set up your canvas so that it was the right size for a Glowforge. So I'm going to assume you know how to do that, and my canvas is already set up to the right size. The first thing that we need for a text-based ornament is a name. So we will go over to the left-hand set of tools and select the text tool and click anywhere on your page, and it will show up with the blinking cursor and the drag box. Now go over to the right-hand toolbar and select the Open Text Style panel, and your text style panel will show up. I'm going to start out typing in just the default font so that I can make sure that everything's spelled right, because some of the script fonts are a little bit hard to read. So I'm going to type my son's name, Michael, and I am going to put 12, 20, 21. And I'm not going to worry about too much here yet because we will be editing the heck out of this thing in the next few steps. So before you can do anything with changing the font, you have to select everything that's in there. And now let's pick a font that we like. To change from the default font, you can scroll within this text style box. You can use either this drag bar, or you can use whatever scrolling method you have on your mouse or your touchpad. And so I am going to go and pick Sedona script. I happen to know that I like this script, and it's way down there, and if I remembered how to type it, I would just start typing, but there it is, and I'm going to up the size just a little bit by pulling down on the size box, and I'll make it 144. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with at least what the font looks like. So before I do anything else, I want to weld the object together. I'm going to use a shortcut up here, but of course you can always go to the Modify panel selection and pick Weld from there as well. And if you didn't see what that does, I will zoom in for you. You see these little areas here that are the overlap of the two letters. If you leave them as they are in the Glowforge and you end up engraving, and that's your choice, whether or not you want to engrave or cut, but engraving and scoring, you will end up with these artifacts there. In engraving, it's going to be even worse than in scoring, because this whole area here would be solid, and then this would be not engraved, and then this area would be solid, and then this would not be engraved, and it would look pretty rough. So I am going to weld everything, and I can see where everything that is disconnected is, because it gets its own little gray box. And so you can see that the I has its own gray box, and the ICHAEL has a box, and then all of the numbers in the date have their own box as well. And we're going to fix that. So the first thing I'm going to do is create just a thin little box to connect the I dot to the I letter. And that looks like an okay size box. I will drag it over, and now I'm going to use the rotate dot to rotate the box so it's matching approximately the same angle as the letter I here. And then I'm going to drag it to a place that I like. I don't need to use any alignment tools. This is just a by eye sort of adjustment. And that looks like it'll be good. And so this little box, I'm going to weld it in a minute, but it is going to let the eye be attached, and it should be sturdy enough for what we're going to do with this 2-layer ornament. The M, I'm going to just nudge it over to the right using my right arrow until I see just a little bit of overlap here. And that is good enough. So now I can weld that entire name by going to the weld box again. And you can see that it's all one box. That means it's all connected. And you can even double check in the node editor, and you can see where all of the nodes, and in Silhouette it's called points, are, and there aren't any breaks. So that is excellent. Now what do we do with the December 2021? Well, I want the font a little bit smaller, so I'm just going to select that part, and I'm going to use the corner boxes to resize it a little bit. For some reason, I think my kid's name is slightly more important than the date. And I think that looks pretty good. So I am going to group those so that I can use alignment now. And I am going to select both that group and the Michael, and I am going to do a horizontal alignment by selecting Align Center. Okay. Now I am going to have the date touch the bottom of my son's name, and so I am just going to hold down Shift and drag the date up. Holding down Shift makes it so that it only moves in one axis. And I'm going to get it so that it just connects everywhere, but just barely. The iffiest part right now is this 2. And so what I'm going to do is ungroup. Then I'm going to nudge that 2 over just the slightest little bit so that I've got a little bit more overlap right here. Let me zoom in. And there is enough overlap. And this 0 doesn't have quite as much overlap as I'm comfortable with. So again, I'm going to just nudge it with my right arrow. And then I'm going to nudge it up just 1 click. And that's not even perceptible that it was adjusted. So I'm pretty happy there. I am not liking how this slash looks. And so I'm going to try just changing the size of it. And that seems okay. It doesn't reduce the thickness too much. So I am going to now select everything, and I'm going to weld it. Now, one of the things I normally like to do that I forgot to do this time, so let's talk about it because it's good, is I like to create an extra copy of my text just in case there's something that I want to do with it later. So I'm going to create a new copy of that. And over in the text style box, if you scroll all the way to the top, you will find your most frequently used or your most recently used fonts. And so this is the Sedona script that I most recently used. So I am going to just retype my son's name and the date. And I will move that off to the side just in case we need it later. Probably won't, but it's kind of a good habit to get into. So let's concentrate back on what we've created here. The next thing that we want to do is to create a outset. What an outset is kind of a bubble around the outside of the shape that you are looking at. And so in this case, an outset could be very complicated and mimic each of these curves, or if you have a large outset, it will be a lot more smooth and just kind of cloud-like. Again, another thing that I like to do, maybe it's a little bit OCD, but I feel better about incrementing my designs this way, is making a duplicate of each of the major steps along the way. So in case I need to use this exact thing again later, I'm just going to duplicate it and toss it off to the side. It's over there, don't worry. So let's select what we want to work with and select the offset panel. There are internal offsets and external offsets. The standard offset is the external offset. Internal offsets are pretty neat. You can use them for things like mandalas, but we're not going to be using that for what we're doing today. So click the offset box and instantly it will create a bubble around your work. That's pretty cool. You can change the sizes if you want. You can also change whether it has sharp corners or round corners. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Let me zoom in to where you can see the difference. Here is the corner on the one. And by leaving the offset area, I accepted that difference. So I'm going to hit delete and get rid of that offset because it's not what I wanted. But we can click the offset button again and I'll show you the difference between the rounded and the rectangular corners. So here's the rounded one and here's the rectangular one. I'm going to go with the rounded again. It's a personal preference. You do what makes sense for you. And again, I forgot that zooming makes the offset stick. So I'm going to again delete my offset, click offset, and I want my offset to be just a tiny bit bigger. So I'm going to change it to 0.14 inches. And then I'm going to click anywhere in this kind of gray area off to the side. And I think that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. I'm going to delete some of these little kind of silly amounts of small holes, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to click apply, which apparently does the same thing as scrolling. But so now select the offset that you just created if you want to delete any little dots like that, and click release compound path. Now it created all of these little gray boxes, kind of like we saw when we tried to weld things and they didn't weld right. So I'm going to delete the ones that I don't want. If I want to edit any of them, I can do that. I'm going to make this one just a little bit bigger, and I'm going to do that by editing the points. I'm going to pull that out a little bit with the little point editing buttons and adjust that one too. I just think it'll be kind of fun to have that empty hole there. I'm not sure what I want to do with that little guy. Do I want to delete it? I'll try making it a little bit bigger. Okay, that's good to me. So now I'm going to select each of these little parts that I had in the offset and the offset itself, and then I'm going to make them a compound path. So now I'm going to fill that back compound path with a color, and I will fill the original text with a color so you can see the difference. Gray. Gray is good. Okay, so let me show you what the release compound path actually does when we're talking about this sort of thing. Release compound path, all of a sudden, each of those little holes no longer shows up as something where you can see through them. Now that's okay on the Glowforge because it cuts or engraves based on the colors that you're using. So it doesn't care whether or not something is a compound path. However, if you are going to sell your file, it's better to have it already set to a compound path. It makes it so that if people are using it for things other than the Glowforge, such as final work or even creating like PNG images for their websites, they are able to do that a lot easier. Just a good practice. So I'm going to make that a compound path again. And the next step that I am going to do is I am going to make a hollow circle. So the hollow circle is in this shape box, and it's below the simple drawing tools, and it is the second from the right hand side on the top row, and it looks like kind of a target bullseye. And these are neat shapes that come with the business edition, and you're able to edit them and adjust them to your heart's desire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the distance from that outer circle to the inner circle until it is something that I feel is a better aspect ratio. And that looks pretty good to me. Again, I'm able to do that with these little gray boxes. I can adjust the outside one, I can adjust the inside one. This red circle here would make it a partial circle. I guess you could do a rainbow or something with that. But we're going to leave it as an enclosed circle for now. And let's see what this looks like. And I think I want the overall size to be just a little bit bigger. I want it to be just kind of kissing the outside edge of the gray letters. And the nice thing about this concentric circle tool is it adjusts them both together. So that looks pretty good to me. I am going to turn the concentric circles into a path. And it makes it so that they are already a compound path. You would have to release them if you didn't want them to be anymore. I'm going to turn them the same gray as the Michael. I am going to make sure that everything is aligned to the center. Okay, so aligning it to the center because of the slant of this font makes it not quite work right. So I'm going to manually move it over until it just kind of looks aesthetically pleasing. And I think that's pretty good. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to move it down a little bit so we continue having a clear picture. And I'm going to use that same tool, and I am going to make a ribbon hanger for the top of the ornament. And that looks pretty good to me. It can be any size you want. If you don't want it to be a circle and want it to be a square, you can do that. But for simplicity, I think that's pretty good. And so I am going to go ahead and weld those together. So you can now see that there's the little hole on top. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it by Command D. Move the second hanger over here. I'm going to turn it green because that's what we're going to put on this one. And let's align them center to center. So I'm going to do the green welding first. And then I will move it to the background and be able to adjust things from there. But I want to make sure everything stays nice and centered and I don't have anything out of alignment, because it's going to be a 2-layer ornament and you're going to glue them together. So if anything's off even 1/10 of an inch, it's going to be visible. So I'm going to click weld, and then I'm going to send that brand new shape all the way to the back. And this button up here is the send all the way to the back button. This one will send things 1 layer back. This one sends things 1 layer forward, and this thing brings them, whatever is selected, all the way forward. So now I have the gray one and the gray Michael there. If you remembered, I had originally duplicated the hanger, and during my Control-Z's undid that, so I'm just going to throw that over to the side again. We probably won't use it. So I accidentally just selected everything. I only want to select the gray hanger and the gray Michael and weld those two together. Now everything is aligned and I can pull them apart. And these are the 2 layers of the ornament. And this is what you want to send to the Glowforge. So again, to be able to send it to the Glowforge, you need to save it as an SVG. For me, I prefer to save the Silhouette Studio version first, just because it has a little bit more history and information in it than a SVG file. Save to hard drive and go to the right folder and save it as an SVG. Okay, that is perfect now. So the final thing that you do is you go to your Glowforge app, go to New Design, Create, Upload from File. Find your file, open it up, and if you have Pro, it'll probably go faster than what mine just did. And I'm going to zoom out and remove my artifacts because the Glowforge does not need those. You can clean them out of your SVG file too. And those are way bigger. I was not paying attention to my dimensions. So I'm going to resize them so that they're about 4 inches high. I think that's a good size. So now I'm going to hit print, and there we go. I have never ever claimed to be a pro, and what happened here, and I probably just showed you depending on how I remember to edit things, is my Glowforge was burning a little bit hot, and the connection between the top of the 2 and the bottom of the 2 just did not survive. Also, this line here was not wide enough, so I'm going to quickly go back to Silhouette Studio and make a couple adjustments for thicknesses. And so I'm going to go to the point editor. And this is why we proof things before we sell them. So I'm going to move these points out. And then for the 2, I'm going to delete that lowest point. And let me zoom in just a little bit more. And I think that if I delete this point here, it's going to change a little bit of the shape of it, but that's okay. it turned it from that really pointy to a much more rounded, and I think that the Glowforge is going to handle that better. Additionally, I'm going to bring this node and this node outbound just a little bit, and I'm going to do the same actions on the second two. Delete that node, pull this guy over, pull this guy over, and there's one more 2 in the year 2021. So delete, pull over, pull over. And that does not do a vast modification to the overall look and feel of the project. So let's save this as an SVG once more. You have to go to save to hard drive to save the SVG. Now, something, I don't know if it happens in all versions of Silhouette as far as revision levels, but in the one that I'm working in, I can't save over a previous SVG file or I get a fatal error. So I'm just going to increment it by adding a 1 there. Saved it. Let's go back into the Glowforge. Let's delete these guys. And you don't have to go back to the dashboard. You can click the Import Artwork blue plus button and upload and find your new artwork. It's going to take a few moments to load. And let's zoom out, delete the extraneous information. Again, make sure that you're set to the right settings. You want to cut when you want to cut, and you want the right material. Let's move these down to about the same size as I did before. And that's close enough. And moving the second piece of artwork down a little bit, again, to just kind of save some material. I don't know why it keeps making it look like the end of the board. Oh, okay, because it's too low. There we go. Additionally, I am going to change the cut settings so that they are a little bit faster. That should make it so that there's a little bit less heat. So I'm just going to have it go at 190 instead of 170. And print. So after all is said and done, I'm pretty happy with how the new ornament came out. This is the finished ornament with it glued upon itself. As I mentioned, I had some delamination problems, and so it did not come out as a clean, tidy burn. But had this been on good plywood, it would have been just fine. So, I hope that this video was useful for you. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions or other tips and tricks that could help. Also, if you have other project ideas, please let me know, and I will be happy to do another video on those ideas in the future. Hit subscribe and help me create more videos. Thanks so much. Bye.